Companies, governments, and charitable organizations alike are all trying to make faster, more cost-effective, and more equitable hiring decisions. Barb, how does Sapia.ai help organizations make better hiring decisions?
So there are two parts to it. The first is you've got to be using data that doesn't have any human decisions in it, and you can't be using resume data. Like, we all know that a resume is pregnant with signals around socioeconomic advantage, race and gender. You have to use a data set that's clean and pure as possible. The other is you've got to attract people in a way that they trust, that they feel they can really engage with. And recruitment has not changed in decades. You don't really want to force people going through a terrible application, but if you can just have them engage on a chat, it feels very natural, it feels comfortable, it's blind, it's untimed. Inclusion starts with your hiring process, and then our technology maintains that diversity through the process.
One of the big advantages you have, your so-called moat, is the proprietary data set you have as inputs to your large language models. 1.4 billion words, over 3 million candidates from 47 countries. How did you amass such an incredibly large and proprietary data set?
Like any startup, we did a lot of experimentation in the early days, and we realized that the only way we were going to build a foundation of ethical AI, which is so critical when you're using AI to inform people decisions, is we had to build that data set ourselves. And we also had to experiment with what are the right questions to ask to get meaningful data. And then we had to build the algorithms that could extract meaning from that language data. We all know now that language data has meaning because we're all playing with GPT, but we've been doing that for the last 5 years. So every time someone completes an interview, that data becomes what we called derived and de-identified, and that becomes our moat, and we own that. And that's what fuels our innovation.
There's a lot to be said for being able to remove bias in people making decisions. But there's a lot of talk out there about how the machine interface and human interface need to really work together. And one of the capabilities of the Sapia.ai Smart Chat interface is the ability to remove so much of the human interaction in filtering through the first set of candidates.
Well, humans don't scale, for starters. As much as you would love to interview everyone and give everyone feedback, no one can do that. And so our technology enables that. I think there's also a myth that AI removes the human touch. What we see is people trust it, they feel safe. There's independent research that says that women applying for tech roles are 30% more likely to apply and stick with the process when you tell them that AI is involved, because they know that they'll be given a fair opportunity.
And then you're closing the loop with the clients you have in terms of what happened with that candidate post a hiring decision or not a hiring decision.
So having data that tells us whether someone was a good performer, which is usually inferred from things like, did they stay in the role or not, helps you learn. So we're really building systems of intelligence for organizations, and that's game-changing for HR, as opposed to very static single-use systems which expire as soon as someone's in the role. And that's where the real power of AI comes for organizations, I believe.
Have you been able to measure the impact you've had on some of your big clients already in terms of success of hiring and costs?
It's kind of quite extraordinary. So day one, we've had our largest client ended up saving $5 million day one from basically automating the process using technology. In terms of reducing turnover, typically it's about a 50-60% reduction within 6 to 9 months. That's where the real impact comes within the business. If you ask anyone who runs a retail store, any consumer brand, what do they care about? They care about the quality of people that they hire. So how do you bring humanity and a human experience to using AI for people?
How do you discern so much from a smart chat interaction?
Language is rich in signal. You just have to look at ChatGPT and understand how powerful language is when you've got large amounts of it and you're analysing it to try and infer signals. When you think about most ways of assessing people, like if you're interviewing me and you're listening to my responses and you're inferring all sorts of things about me, how structured am I as a thinker? Am I talking about myself in a way that shows humility, that shows thoughtfulness, that shows curiosity? Am I coming across as extroverted or introverted? We're doing that anyway every day, but we only see what we're used to seeing, and we obviously bring our many unconscious biases to that process. And the amount of variance that lives in language is really what drives the accuracy of our models. So if I ask everyone in this room to respond to a question, we'll all give different answers because our stories are different. So it's a very powerful way to truly understand people for their unique story.
We're living in a world now of deep fakes and ChatGPT generated responses. You have a really good capability to detect when people are faking an interview.
We have built, I think it's one of the, I don't know if anyone else has got this, but we built a large language model which can detect if someone's using what we call AGC, artificially generated content. And that's because we have the data pre the world of generative AI that we can compare it to. But what's really important is that we let you know that as a candidate. We're all about transparency. You know, transparency creates trust in the process. And so we tell you, hey, we think you might have sourced this from artificially generated content. Would you like to submit or not?
Right.
And then the organisation gets a signal. And that's reduced it to something like 0.25%.
You've been able to attract some great investors already. Barb, what's the expansion roadmap beyond Australia for Sapia.ai?
So we're global right now. We have a go-to-market team in the UK and in the US. You know, US is really where we see massive opportunity for us because diversity is a huge tailwind. I think people really want to solve for that, but in a way that is kind of safe and
genuinely
feels
now.
comfortable. Yeah. So what I would love for our Series B is a deep tech investor, because I think, you know, just a regular investor may not get the power of our data and our innovation.